I'm Diana and I'm here to help you enjoy your watercolour painting even more by demonstrating different subjects, different techniques, and hopefully giving you the opportunity to try out these new techniques in your own painting. Today I thought we'd do something different. Still life, nature mort as it is in French. I can never quite get my head around why it should be dead nature, but there we are. But I've chosen my subject, a silk scarf and a necklace, two together. I'm going to start right from the beginning with setting up a model, choosing the colours, starting off right from the beginning. Haven't painted this before, it will be an adventure for me too. I'm not sure how it's going to go. So stick with me and we'll learn lots along the way. Okay, off we go. Now I have my still life subject arranged on an old canvas so I can move it around. I've tried to keep it simple. This video is all about light and shade and texture. And I have a silk scarf here, which is a delicate blue with a hint of violet, and a necklace. Not sure if I'm going to paint all the necklace, but I have it arranged so that I have folds in the fabric and lots of interesting shapes. The light is coming from the right, and because it's placed on a board, I can move it. Now, when you're choosing a still life subject, it is important that you look at the subject from the same angle every time. So I'm going to move the board up the table, and this is the view that I'm going to have of the subject. I have my paper here, Arches 300 gram fine grain, and I'm just basically using a 2B pencil just to give me an idea of the position of the cloth and how the necklace relates to it, so that I have a guide for when I apply the paint. But I'm not doing any solid lines, I'm not doing any detail. This is just to locate the different objects on the paper. I haven't stretched the paper. It will buckle a little, but then it will settle down as we go wet on wet. So follow me, I'll go through the colours I'm going to use in the next frame. So now I have all my materials organised. The sketch is there just in the basics of the drawing. I have my palette, Permanent Rose Ultramarine Blue with Payne's Grey, and a blue palette here with Winsor Blue Green shade and Winsor Blue Red shade, and also Payne's Grey is there as well. That's for the detail later, and the Indian Red and Payne's Grey palette. Working on tiles like this means that I can store the tiles between appropriate pictures and always use every bit of watercolour paint, which if you're using the best quality paints is expensive, but works out good in the long run because the professional paints tend to be stronger and produce more colour for the amount of paint used. So I find they're more economical than the student range. And also because I use a range of palettes which I store in a CD rack or just in a stack of dry paint, I can always choose the palettes that I use and they go on for ages. So it's quite an economical way of storing and keeping watercolour paints, something you can't really do with acrylics. I have my brushes here, the usual size 10 mop brush, a size 4 mop brush and my liner brush for detail. And the model that I'm going to use here is, as I said, can be easily moved if need be, but for the moment it's fine there. So off we go and let's paint. We're starting off now with the mix, a very diluted mix of permanent rose and ultramarine blue, and applying it very quickly, not as quickly as the image that you see because I have speeded it up. But the thing is to work with a puddle of colour all the time, and because we don't want any dry edges at this stage, any harsh net edges. So I'm just using my pencil work as a guide, just adding a hint of colour to the whole area covered by the scarf. It's been speeded up, as I've said, 4 times the actual speed. The key is to work so that you don't have any dry bits arriving there, and you can see it's still shiny wet. I can start to spot in a little bit more colour in the areas where we see the shadows. Following the model, we have the big fold in the scarf on the right hand side and also on the left. My pencil drawing gives me a hint of where the necklace is lying in relationship to the folds, which will be important later on. So it's just a question of working speedily and having enough colour mixed so that you don't have to stop the process and mix more colour, and also that the colour stays the same throughout. I'm adding a little bit more colour to the edge where the fringe is with my liner brush, working along the line, and also using the liner brush to define the smaller areas and creases in the scarf. But it is just a basis, this. It doesn't have to be exact. And once it's dry, well, almost we'll hardly see the folds, but it is a question of building up that light and shade. Now I've given some thought to the fringe, which could be problematic if I decided to work totally on dry paper. So I've come up with the solution of using a fan brush. This is a natural bristle fan brush, and I've wet the area along the edge of the scarf, and now I'm just dotting in some colour in the hope that it runs down into the wet areas created by the fan. You can see it is working. I've tried to come up close so you can see the process, and it will be a gradual build-up of colour, but I think this is going to work better than just going in there with paint on dry paper, because then the fringe will be too rigid. And as we see from the model, the fringe is very fine and tangled and disorderly, so the fact that there's water randomly put on by the fan brush will help to give us that disordered look, and it is starting to come to life, so that's mission accomplished really with that. But as I've said already, it is early days and the painting is dry now, so we can get a little bit braver with the shading, and I'm using the same palette, permanent rose, ultramarine blue, with just a hint of Payne's grey added, and putting the darker colour on bravely in all the areas where the folds in the fabric are. But as you can see, I'm using water to blend the colour a little so we don't have any harsh edges. And although I know it's hard to see in this video, the pencil drawing of the necklace is helping me to know where to put the darker colour and the folds, because very much the necklace follows the line of the folds in the scarf, and this will become more obvious as we go along. I'm also wetting the area sometimes before I put the colour on, and this makes it a bit less scary because we can work our way along adding colour then and know that the edges are going to be softened by the water that's already sitting there on the paper. And gradually the folds in the scarf start to appear, and it no longer looks flat, which is the whole reason why we're using this technique at this stage. Again, we've speeded up the video considerably so that it doesn't go on for too long, but you can still see the process, and I hope that's the case. Water's a great thing, helps you out all the time. Gradually blocking in the colour, keeping it nice and wet. Now I'm thinking again about the fringe and adding, we're going darker every time to give more contrast. Now the painting is dry and I'm using a waterproof fine liner to give me the contours of the necklace, just following the pencil line that I have. Now it does need to be a waterproof liner. We can't use anything that's going to move when we put more washes of paint over the top. I'm able to turn the paper just to get the right position, and now we can start with the beads. And I'm using my other blue palette, which has Winsor Blue Green shade and also Winsor Blue Red shade. And if you look at the model, you'll see that there are points of light on all the beads, just like the twinkle in an eye really. And so we apply the paint quite generously, but it is important to leave that little twinkle, that little flash of light, and apply the paint to the contours of the bead first, filling in the area with your generous amount of paint, but always leave that little spark of light. I'm working my way along the necklace now, adding the beads as I go. We have different sizes and different colours, so I've also brought cobalt turquoise palette into play, which you see on the right. I'm just adding a little dot of cobalt turquoise in places, just to give that lovely contrast, because it is a beautiful necklace. Now we are at the stage now where all the beads are in place, so now I can start to bring the two processes together and add more shading which corresponds with how the necklace is lying on the scarf. This will help to bring the whole subject together, and at this stage it's good to be a little bit braver. Make sure that your shade colour is the same combination but more concentrated with pigment. Gradually following the contours and the dips in the fabric created by the beads, but always just washing it. I'm using the yellow acrylic brush here to move some colour if it starts to dry and looks too rigid a line. Just working my way along, observing all the time. And it does help that we have the model right there, so I can refer to it all the time. Again, of course, this process is speeded up. Now coming over to the left hand side of the model, where there is another dip or fold in the fabric, but I'm wetting the colour, the paper first. And then adding water by the side. This is where this process I find students find most difficult, is going into a painting when you've done quite an amount of work already and adding strong colour over existing colour. But remember, if you allow the water to soften lines, it will be okay. So be brave and add the colour where needed. So now I'm thinking about the shadows on the scarf created by the necklace. Again, the model is there so I can refer to it at every point, and I'm using the liner brush to delicately trace the shadow. Because the light is coming from the right, most of the shadows created by the wire that the necklace is made up of and the beads are on the left hand side. But in some areas, because of the dip in the fabric, they're elsewhere. And it's just a question of painting what you see. And this is where having the model there helps the process considerably. And the colour I'm using is, again, a mix of permanent rose and ultramarine blue. I enjoy doing shadows like this because it lifts the object off the paper and gives that three-dimensional look. So in essence, we've created texture and shadow and detail. Now I'm adding a little more colour to the fringe just to bring it to a corresponding value as the rest of the scarf. Of course, as always, we could do more work on this, but this video I hope is the right length for you to see the process and maybe encourage you to have a go. So there we are. We have our still life. Thank you for watching my video. It proved to be more complicated than I first thought, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it gave you lots of new ideas and new techniques to think about including in your watercolour painting. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe and like, and leave any comments you may have. Till the next time, when we'll tackle another subject, simple or difficult, who knows, but one thing's for sure, we'll enjoy our watercolour painting. Bye!